Hi, I'm Mark, and today on Outside Views I need to talk about the behavior of members of the Tory government again. Lockdown parties, rumours of sex, allegations of bullying. Well, in Great Britain, political personnel are getting caught up in new scandals. And currently, the frenzied Home Secretary Suella Braverman is in a headwind. And Boris Johnson's Partygate affair is receiving new fuel. We talked about this already. Do you also have a question about the summit? Well, that's what Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was irritated like while answering British journalists' questions after the G7 summit in Japan. But instead of Ukraine or China, media interest focused on Interior Minister Suella Braverman. And the reason was, Braverman made the headlines because she was caught driving too fast a year ago. And she is said to have subsequently instructed her officials to arrange for her to attend a discreet private course instead of attending a conventional traffic course to raise awareness of speed. I talked about this in a video. And the British government is once again in need of explanation because of alleged misconduct by its own top staff. And the focus is now Suella Braverman. And she, after receiving this fine, is said to have mixed up work and private life. However, Prime Minister Sunak now wants to refrain from investigating his cabinet colleague. As the Times reported on Sunday, Braverman, as I said, have to try to avoid a speeding penalty last summer. And accordingly, Braverman urged that instead of a fine and points in the traffic register, a private driving safety course should be completed. It was important to the minister that the lesson were private, so that other participants would not find out about her misconduct. However, according to the Times, several officials refused her request, so Braverman finally hired a consultant to influence the driver training provider. And when that failed too, Braverman eventually accepted 3 points on the register, according to the report. The crackdown raised questions as to whether the Tory politician was breaking service regulations by involving civil servants in her private affairs. The opposition called for an investigation into the incident. Braverman is considered a hardliner within the Tories, particularly because of her handling of migration. And Sunak now spoke a word of, let's say, power. My determination is that these things did not violate ministerial code, is what Sunak wrote in a letter to Braverman, as was reported by Reuters. As you can see, better steps could have been taken to avoid the impression of dishonesty. That's at least something he said. But Braverman said in a letter to Sunak that she made the attempts to protect her privacy and security, but did not follow up after being advised not to do so. In retrospect, if I were faced with a similar situation, I would have chosen a different course of events. It was neither her intention to avoid punishment, or never. As I said, the opposition criticized Braverman's behavior as a breach of ministerial rules, and the Prime Minister now denies this. But Braverman is one of the key figures on the right wing of the Tory party, and in her case, her supporters put strong pressure on Sunak not to take action against the minister and allegedly accused left Liberal government officials of witch-hunting real conservatives. However, Braverman is also criticized by right-wing circles because the government, contrary to its promises, has not managed to significantly reduce migration. This Thursday, when I'm filming this, the latest figures on immigration will be published, and observers expect a record value. I will talk about that in my video tomorrow morning because the numbers are not out when I have to film this one. Sunak's former superior, ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson, is also making negative headlines again. And according to a media report, the central government agency Cabinet Office had forwarded information to the police about several violations in the London seat of government, Downing Street, and on the official country estate Chequers. I already talked about this in another video as well. And accordingly, Johnson's diaries had indicated visits from friends and relatives to Chequers, which was not allowed at the time due to the corona rules. Who made them again? A parliamentary committee is currently investigating whether Johnson lied to the House of Commons in the Partygate affair about the lockdown celebrations in Downing Street. Johnson had repeatedly emphasized that all rules had been observed, and he later admitted mistakes. However, he always acted to the best of his knowledge and belief. An investigative report gave his then government devastating testimony that Johnson and now current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak were fined for attending an event. Johnson's escapades are also sensitive for Sunak. The head of government is already being criticized because Johnson's legal fees of more than 220,000 euros are being paid by the state. A spokesman for Johnson said on Tuesday evening, according to the BBC, that it was another politically motivated intrigue now. The ex-Prime Minister's confidants and Conservative MPs claimed the allegations were made by left-leaning government officials. The Conservative Telegraph newspaper quoted a leading Tory as saying it was a witch hunt against the right wing of the party. Yeah, a witch hunt everywhere. Government officials in London have sparked new excitement after reporting former Prime Minister Boris Johnson to the police. And Johnson is said to have not only attended parties at number 10 Downing Street during the strict COVID lockdown periods of 2020 and 2021, but also invited relatives and friends to Chequers. And that just for a happy get-together. And if the allegation is confirmed, Johnson faces both further police penalties and renewed allegations that he deliberately lied to Parliament at the time. And so the committee that's currently examining whether or not this was the case might not be the last. A negative verdict could finally end Johnson's political career after he lost his position as party and government leader last summer, mainly because of the so-called Partygate affair. Supporters of the ex-Prime Minister, who blamed the then Chancellor of the Exchequer and now Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for Boris Johnson's fall, and they consider the new allegations and the involvement of the police to be a conspiracy. I mentioned that earlier. And it's kind of for the government's set game. The unquestionably politically motivated action was bizarre and unacceptable, said a spokesman for Johnson. And right-wing conservative newspapers like London's Daily Express saw it on Wednesday. That's a set-up thing, they had in their headlines. The Daily Mail reported that Johnson was threatening the Cabinet Office, that means his own government, with judicial measures. And the Daily Telegraph quoted Tory politicians as saying Johnson was the victim of blackmail. And the Times reported that more and more Tory right-wing MPs suspected a nasty Downing Street conspiracy against their people and are now debating a motion of no confidence in Rishi Sunak in their parliamentary group. The government, meanwhile, emphatically denied that any minister had a hand in this new Partygate affair. The new dispute was triggered by previously unknown entries from Johnson's official appointment calendars and diaries, and that during the pandemic. And Johnson had given these diaries to the lawyers who, on behalf of, and they are paid by the government, and they were to prepare his defense for the upcoming major COVID investigation. However, when the lawyers came across some entries that they considered questionable, they informed the Cabinet Office and its top officials as a precaution. And these, in turn, felt obliged to pass the material on to the police and to the investigating Lower House Committee. So Boris Johnson had this handed over. So he, blindly fighting for his defense in another matter, handed this stuff in. And so the one that brought this into play was Boris Johnson and not some government conspiracy. He handed over his diaries, his calendars, and they just found facts in them. And that's the really funny part. He thought he was smarty pants and could use all this and hand over everything to say, I cooperate with everything, I'm the innocent guy. And then he hands over allegedly, I still have to say I haven't seen them and there was no ruling on them, but he hands over evidence against himself. And that's what's happening here. And so this time that is really funny. And still wondering why the country is paying for his expenses, but that's another point. I'll see you in my next video, and tomorrow, of course, on migrants, then I'll be back.